Two key questions that I suppose it applies to me to sort of a social media strategy in terms of what it is you're trying to do. And the first two questions are, so what? Now, you're not going to engage an audience, at least a user audience, in the full academic paper. You're not giving them the full academic paper. What you're trying to do is entice them in to then go on and access the academic paper. So the key message is it's not what they call a slide unit. You're not developing a slide that's basically your entire paper, because for that purpose you might as well send them your entire paper. What you're trying to do is to get different levels of interest. Now for some case, in my case, which is teachers, I want some engagement in terms of, these are the fundamental ideas. So my research has some conclusions. How do those conclusions are important in terms of how I see the group using that information? So that's kind of that's the so what question. What does my research come out to say? And you know, this is a carrot. This is a hook to get them in. You're trying to get traffic to the paper. You're trying to get people to engage in the full ideas. So you've got to think about what's your key take-home message. What's the impact that you want to have, I suppose? So the so what is, you know, what's the impact? And the second one is, why does it matter? So if you could write on your post-it notes those two questions. So the one we go through, we're thinking about the so what question, because that'll become a bit of a title, and we're thinking about a why does it matter question. Okay? And then we're going to leave those on the desk in front of us. Okay, and they're going to inform some of the decisions that we make when we begin to analyse your own work in terms of what the so what and the why does it matter elements are of what it is you're trying to put forward. And an analogy I use a lot with my with PhD students I work with and people who are coming up with ideas is, you know, can you pass the elevator test? Has anyone heard of the elevator test before? There's a whole notion that you're working in a certain field and the person in the field gets into the elevator with you. You're on your own and they're going from the same floor as you, and you've got, basically, they turn around to you and say, what do you do? And you've got this 30-second elevator ride to explain to them your key concepts. And almost within this presentation, you're trying to answer, at least within the first 30 seconds of someone viewing it, that elevator test. You're trying to pass that. So you have to sell those ideas. That works really well as an analogy for, you know, when someone comes to you and say, what's your research on? And you go, oh, well, it's really difficult to explain. Well, simplify it, because I need to understand, you know, enough without dumbing it down what it is that you do. So we talk about the elevator test. So part of this process is, can you guys pass the elevator test in the first 30 seconds of your presentation, which will then encourage somebody to click on the next link that you send, which is your paper. Or in my case, I put the abbreviated link first and then the full paper link next, so that there was nowhere else to go to find that extra link. Okay, but can you pass the elevator test? Now, personally, when I'm looking at a presentation, I use something called the Principles of Presentation Zen. And if you've never heard of it, it's brilliant, really good stuff. And it's developed by a guy who used to work for Apple called Gar Reynolds. And it's a real simple approach in terms of what it is you're trying to do. Now, if I'm saying you've got a 30-second elevator ride, so 30 seconds of your presentation to get somebody engaged, you've got to do it quickly. So he talks about different things. Restraint. So if you remember, go back to my first presentation, there was lots of highlighter pen on that PDF. Now if I put all of that into a document, A, it would either be font size 10 and no one would read it, or it would be 600 slides and nobody would read it. So part of it comes back to that notion of the so what and why does it matter questions, which is why we focused on those. So restraint. So it's this notion of think to subtract and not to add. So even that long talk, you know, that one word came down to a much smaller idea on the slide. So how do you boil it down? I think it's a notion of simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So how can you boil an idea down to its basic levels without going beyond it? Now we see muscle cars. The idea is it goes faster and faster as they strip out everything they have to, including the comfortable seat and the stereo, so that car can do an extra meter per second. So it's signal versus noise ratio. The next one is simplicity. So, you know, big images, big ideas that tie together, not trying to put your whole... What the idea of this is to get people to follow your work, to follow you, to understand what it is you say, not to give them the whole message, to try to keep it so simple. There we go. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. It's by stripping down an image to the essential meaning, an artist can amplify its meaning. So when we focus on, you know, one element of a picture, and that's what we're trying to do. It's just, you're trying to amplify the meaning of what you've said. You're not trying to tell them everything. That comes when you read your paper, which ultimately, when they cite you and they engage with your work, because ultimately is academics. That's what we're trying to get them to do. A naturalness. So that a good image is only good if it links to the message you're trying to put across. It could be a beautiful image, but if it doesn't connect, actually, it takes away. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. It's sort of like, you know, the art of Zen, the Japanese garden is very simplistic in its idea, and the idea that actually accentuates what it is that you're trying to do. Hang on. Now, one video I forgot to plug the thing in. Hope you like Star Wars. Oh, and the music's not on. Mute. See, you've got to rehearse these things.
Is it the sound of your laptop that you need to have?
Sorry?
Is it on your laptop or is it on here?
No, I've got it plugged into the thing. Oh. You can't hear it. Ugh. It's you.
We'll never get it out now. Where's my new word? Get back to me. Do you know what did I say? Master Moving Stones is one thing. This is totally different. No different. Only different in your mind. You must back there. Look at him there.
And I love that idea, and I'm sorry about the sound, but the idea that you must unlearn what you have learned. You know, we write 7,000 word, supposedly in my field, 7,000 word. I don't think I've ever written a 7,000 word paper. It's always gone a little bit over. And when I mean a little bit, I mean 7-10% or beyond. And yet what we try to do is get people to engage. So what we're trying to strip away. If they want a justification for your argument, then you give it in the paper. So you're not there to necessarily build, you might want to build a justification for what you're saying, but you've got to be careful of how much of that you're giving away, because ultimately, you don't want to give it away. Does that make sense? You want the access on the universe, on the paper, and you want people to go away and uncover all of the other ideas that you're talking about. So it's trying to get away from, well, I must justify, we always get to the, who said that and why, right on shooter site, and they make these broad sweeping statements, and then they just claim credit for it. It's kind of like, who said this? And actually what we're saying here is, in this situation you can do that, because you have the backing of all the other work that you've done. You don't need to say these things. So we kind of, as academics, have to unlearn what I've learned. Now another one, if you haven't come across it, I highly recommend this book. It's a book called Made to Stick. And it's by the Chip brothers. No. Chip is one of the brothers. It's by the Heath brothers. And it's a brilliant book for any educator, for anyone trying to do presentations. But they have 6 key ideas. And we're going to look at those very briefly. And again, simplicity. You're looking for one statement that's so profound that an individual spends a lifetime learning to follow it. And we have these in our vocabulary. So if you can, in my field there's this one quote, there's 2 quotes. One is busy, happy and good. So in education, we actually aspire to children being busy, happy and good. Now that paper has been cited thousands of times. for that phrase. And somebody else just used the term competent bystander. And a competent bystander in an educational context is someone who looks like they're busy and engaged in what you're doing, but actually they're very, very good at doing nothing. That, likewise, is another phrase that has been massively cited. So these are, I mean, you will have them in your own field. Some that you see again, and you want, I want that quote. But one sentence so profound that an individual spends the rest of their life trying to follow it. And Proverbs are really good for this. So it's thinking about what your core message is. What's the key point? So again, we come back to this notion. And if I go back to the idea of images working with the idea, so the core message, you know, in terms of how that happens, and the key idea. So, you know, when you're looking at these, how do you make those two ideas draw on? And whole images with lots of dark space or light space can be really good in terms of how you present, because you're drawing people in. And if they can remember your key idea from a picture, then they might remember your key idea as they move forwards. Unexpectedness. And when they do this, they talk about this story about a guy who he's travelling and he goes to a bar and he sits down and an attractive woman sends him a drink over. And the next thing he realizes, he wakes up in this ice cold bath. And he's really drowsy and a bit dead, and he sees this message in front of him. It says, call 911. It's an American story. Call 999. He looks down and finds his phone, and he picks his phone up and he calls it and he goes, yeah, hi, what's wrong? I'm in a bucket full of ice. Reach behind you. Yeah. Can you find a tube in your back? Yeah. Okay, we know that there's a team of organ harvesters in the area. You've had your kidney taken. Stay there, an ambulance is on its way. And that's a really powerful story. It's unexpected. Now, you go back to an end of a session and you ask somebody what the key message is, and they'll go, drink, stranger, bath, kidney. And it's got thing, but it's shocking. And it's a little bit out there. So think about how you get people's interest and curiosity, how you shock them. I love this expression. We need to violate people's expectations. So with an academic paper, you expect something to be unfortunately, quite dry, quite disassociated. And what you're trying to do here is invite people in. So you're trying to make it more interesting. And this idea of opening holes in people's knowledge. Don't tell them what they already know. You can do that in the paper as you build your argument. What you're trying to do is tell them what they don't know and why your idea is really, really interesting. Take them on a journey. But we do need some concreteness. So you do need some expertise. So, let's kill two birds with one stone. Let's think about what we're doing. If I flash up this message, let's work towards maximising our research output while improving the quality of our teaching by being research informed and cutting edge, it doesn't stick with you. But if I can kind of move that down to maximising our input, improving our teaching, being research informed, the ideas begin to become more concrete. If I take away all the extraneous stuff, then we begin to see. And what we're trying to do in terms of simplicity is what's the so what and why does it matter questions is what we're looking to answer. And a lot of it is superfluous. So think about, you can't give them 200-word quotes, so they can get that from the paper that you're doing. Credibility. You're credible. You have credibility, but there are other people in your field who are particularly credible. So if you've used them, drawing them in on that language, and that author can be really successful. So in education, if you're talking about policy, you might be talking about, if you're not in education, I apologise, Michael Apple or Stephen Ball. If you're working in a different field, there'll be key people. So if you've used them in your paper, use their credibility to your advantage. Help people to visualise our ideas. So if I talk about 12 hours of battery life, it doesn't necessarily a good idea. We know roughly what 12 hours is, but give them something concrete like enough battery to fly to Japan, and suddenly your ideas will stick. So when you think about that, you start thinking about a concept in terms of how the process works. And emotions. You want people to engage enough to move on to your work. Whether that's to follow you on Twitter, whether that's to read the full paper, hopefully to cite you, to invite you to Japan for the 12 hours to do the keynote at the next conference, or whatever reason. We do this for a purpose, so you want to sell it to them. So make them feel something. Now this one makes me give them an image. 100 grams of fat itself is not particularly useful, but if you're selling it, now you might be selling it in a completely different way. 100 grams of fat might be a good thing, so this wouldn't necessarily be the picture you used. But the image can be very powerful in terms of how you translate your ideas. And if you can't get the synergy between the image and the idea, blank screen is better. So don't muddle what it is you're trying to do. And tell them stories. So can you remember the key facts from the story I told you? Tube. Anybody else? Drink. Bathtub. And often when we get into these situations, those stories don't stick. But if you tell them a story and it connects with them, then it can be a very powerful way of getting them to connect with your ideas and want to go further. That's what we're looking for here. We're looking for a want. We're not looking for an endpoint. I published this paper, click, no, thank you. We're looking for where did that bit come in? I'm going to read on because I want to find out where that bit came in. Okay, and then we're engaging them not just in the download of the paper, but engagement in ideas and taking it forwards. When you watch documentaries, they're not just facts. So we've got to be careful when we're presenting our research ideas that they're not just specific take-home messages. What's the story behind them? We need to know who the participants are. That's why they come into the study. Okay? We need to know how you understood it. So some of that is important, but it's not the end point. And if we can tell a story, it engages the reader and it brings them into the story, and that's where we then move on. Okay, so now we get to the practical bit. So we start with a brainstorming session. Now the key, and the reason we have post-it notes, and in some cases these are too big. These are to me, this is when I do this, and I do this, I use them this big. Because the idea, the smaller the post-it note, the less information I can get on it. The trouble is, even this, if you write really small, you can fit 200 words on it. And we're not looking for that, we're looking for key ideas. So what we're going to try to do is go small. So if you've got a bigger one, write a bit bigger. Okay? Okay? If you've got a smaller one, just write normal. But what we're trying to do is limit you. And we're looking initially in these two questions. So what, and why does it matter? And what you should have is a piece of your work that you want to translate. But what I want you to do is I want you to step away from the computer and I want you to go analog. Because at this point, you need to understand your work. Now it may be that you've brought 2 or 3 pages of your results section, because that's what I'm kind of interested in. What you found, not what other people told you to do in terms of setting up a paper. Now it might be something, it might be a project idea, or you might have to sell it to them, or it might be something you want to put across them. But we want to answer these 2 questions. So what, and why does it matter? Okay? And the reason that we go off the computer is that, I don't know about you, but I'm sick of email alerts and the draw of, the internet. At this point, if you want to write something about so-and-so, then write that. Write something about, not so-and-so, but write down what it is. And then you can always, as you bring this into a presentation, go and look for that information. It's like often we are writing, we get distracted, I need a reference for that. What I tend to write is, get reference for this, and then keep writing. And then when I get to it, when I'm proofreading it, then I know I need to go and do that search, rather than getting caught up in doing that search on the internet at that point, and then watching my emails come in and doing those sorts of things. So, we're going to go analog. So what I want you to do with your post-it notes and your 2 questions is brainstorm. What we'll be looking at in this situation is literally, so what? And write ideas. At this point, we want more. We want to be inclusive of ideas. And literally, write education, stick it down. That we're not looking for an order, you don't have to write in any order, write what comes into your head. Write it down, whether it's a key message or a key author, or you can remember a key finding or whatever it is. and literally write it down. And by the end of this 5 minutes, you should have 20 or 30, not 2 or 3. Because once we've got the ideas down, we're then going to sort them, and then we're going to be exclusive. So we can be inclusive at the moment, and once we've got that brainstorming and we've set them out in some storyboard, then we can start to say, well, actually I need something else in here, or I don't need that. So literally write. As long as you can read your writing, it doesn't matter. Okay? Right. Is I try to start just with the title slide. What I find really useful at this point, when I'm doing this, is to press Control D. So rather than create new, I duplicate the slide. What I tend to do is do that multiple times. Okay? And what I'm looking for, if I press View, it can be really useful to use slide sorter, which kind of shows me where I am. And this will later be helpful for moving ideas around. But what we have now, if I go to this, is Arial and font size 44. Now, my challenge to you is to produce a slide with nothing smaller than 44 on it. Because again, in terms of, we talk about a post-it note, then what that does is limit you in terms of what you can have. It also means, which is a bit, I know it's not the case in terms of a presentation, but it is in terms of a lecture. If I get this chair in my lecture, and I'm smaller than 44, I can't read the slide. So, while your audience will predominantly be on a small screen looking at it, if you decide to use this as a summary of your work in a lecture, then the person back there can't read it. One of the things that really annoys me when you get to presentations where people go, I apologise for the small font size, and you're like, well, why is it there in the first place? You know, in terms of product design, it's particularly rubbish because you can't read what you're trying to say. So, experience tells me that 44 is a good size because it allows the person at the back of the room you're trying to engage in their ideas. So what we would now do is we would now translate, and what I want to do, maybe take one of the questions and just do the so, what, why does it matter, or you hierarchically shift your things. So, excuse me. So that we have the key idea there. Okay? So, you would inevitably start with the title. Okay? And at some point you also want where they can access the whole document. The best thing I can do here is so what you want to do is to start to translate your post-it notes into slideshow. So what we did for this presentation as an example is the paper title and then where they could find the reference. And then from there, we had 40 slides that we went on. So big image, small font, and then again the idea is that you can do. So a little bit of a background that we went through in terms of how the images work. There are multiple outcomes of PE. The 4 outcomes we're interested in are what we were doing, trying to tie the images in. So again, trying to understand what it was we were doing. So the key messages came first. And there were some, some notes of, so the purpose of the study was here. And again, it's more than 10 characters, but it's not tiny. So take your post-it notes and begin to put some of these ideas onto PowerPoint. So if I come back to here, so I now go to my second slide, and so one of the key outcomes of this was 4 outcomes of PE. Well, I'll use physical education. and then it's significant enough that they would then say what they are. So, physical, cognitive, social, can't spell, social and affective. But I'm not looking for much more beyond that. So try to take what you've done, no images at this point, just the key phraseology that you've written down. Does that make sense? So we're trying to get these ideas onto slides. And we do all the formatting and all that sort of stuff later. So because we can plan around that. But what are the key ideas? The analogy I was giving you, what you're trying to get people to do, the key decision-making process in terms of which research we use often occurs weeks, months later. So you're writing your own paper and you want to use a piece of literature, research to support you, or they have a really good idea. That's the key decision-making process. Why are they going to come back to your work? What you're trying to do in terms of the presentation is get that kind of residual memory in there, so when they get to the decision-making process, they go, I saw a really good presentation on this, and they go back to this, and then they go to your paper. And that's what you're trying to do. Because often when we're writing, that's when we do our literature search. Or we remember something we've used previously, and that's what you're trying to do in terms of this process, so that people, if you're writing on a certain field, they might go, oh, so-and-so wrote a review of literature on that, and that's where you go. Or I watched something really important. But there's a difference between moving from what we have here, which is some very analog ideas, to what Carl's going to talk about, which is sort of very dynamic ideas. And that's the same ideas, they just now move. My ideas move if you press forwards. Now, Carl's going to talk about how I might turn this into a video. And with the images in there, and PowerPoint allows you to do that anyway.